which is nothing more than the Zodiac, and decoding. And once you decode the Zodiac, now I'm not this chart, I'm not going to write on it, but if you see this line here and this line here, you're talking about energy or the sun's energy coming into the Earth's surface. This would be the equator, okay? And this can go a lot of different ways. Now, one of the ways you can take this cross is break it down into life. If this is 0, come 9 years this way, 9 years this way, 9 years back here, that's 27 years. In real life, that's your youth. Okay? Now we'll take from 27 to 36 to 45. That's your power years, or the years that you really spend accumulating wealth and material things. Okay? Now, this is where it gets interesting. From 45, we go up here to 54 to 63, back to 72. Okay? That's your wisdom years. Now, at that point, if you haven't gained full knowledge, you're back to 0. Huh? Now, how does that break down in real life for us? How many of our seniors are experiencing mental loss, autism, all those kinds of things as elders? Because they didn't gain full knowledge of who they are and their purpose on this planet. And this always works out to be true. So those of us that are in probably this stage for the most part, we need to understand that this is not all about gaining stuff. Knowledge is power. That has always been the case, always will be the case. Power is the ability to define reality and have other people accept your definition as though it were their own. How did we go from the greatest people and the first people on earth to the bottom of the barrel today? They took your knowledge, they turned it upside down. I need a piece of paper that I can write on. That I can write on. Now this is going to be inverted, but I'm going to start out by it being the way it actually was for us to begin with. This is what the original pyramid and the first Masons were all about. Their pyramid actually pointed downward. Why? Because they actually came from south of the equator. So all of their orientation was really based in the southern hemisphere first. The southern hemisphere and the southern pole star is called Set. S-E-T or S-U-T. Once they began their sojourn down the Nile, you're going north, but you're going downhill. Okay, from the highlands, Kilimanjaro, to the sea. As you move further and further down the Nile, you have now crossed the equator. So all of the things that you have been doing here, at this point, the heavens would be equal. Once you continue moving north to Egypt, you are now oriented everything in the northern hemisphere. Which becomes this top pyramid that we all think and know and talk about. But the truth of the matter is, it started in the South with the Southern Hemisphere. This is older than this. That's why we need to know that even in Masonry, they started doing all these things in the Southern Hemisphere long before they got to the Northern Hemisphere. I mean, hundreds and thousands of years before they got there. Okay? The name of the northern pole star is Horus. Horus and Set is Jesus and Satan today. But it's really positive and negative. Electricity and magnetism. And that's what we have to get back and understand. This was never about anything more than the law of opposites. At the end of the day, everything in the universe operates off the law of opposites. Right. Now, where do we see that? And for those of you who've been looking at Santos, some of this will be familiar. South Korean flag is the law of opposites. Yeah. But it also has earth, air, fire, water. Earth, air, fire, water in symbolism looks like this. Now, keep in mind, this swastika is African, and it, again, earth, air, fire, water, all opposites. Also the basis for mathematics. And the square. Huh? This is the square. Okay? Now, notice the difference. This is African, this is Nazi. Just like this. They took your knowledge and turned it upside down. They became chosen, you became niggas. Right. Huh?
You got it, Dad. Where you reap what you sow.
So in order for us to fix this, we're going to have to go back and flip the script. I tell people all the time, go back and just do what the Jews did to you. Just redo it to them. Take your stuff back and you be fine. But you cannot continue to follow your oppressor and his system and his rules around every day and think that you're ever going to win at this. Democrat, Republican, that's foolishness. You didn't start those parties. You will never control or run them. We need to start our own. Yeah. And get off of Hillary's bus and Bernie's bus. Because at the end of the day, Obama's black. Matter of fact, the brother's Kenyan. And it didn't help us too much because the white people that run this said, we don't care who's in that, we run this. Okay? Make sure you clear about how this is going to go. And we will stop doing everything just to make sure you don't get anything. That's how crazy they are. Now, symbolism is key to our success. And most of you know all this. So, it's the symbol for CBS television. Okay? It's also the pineal gland, or your all-seeing eye, and where God is in your physical body. So, if you could get the pituitary gland and the pineal gland, where do you find these two, for those of you who already know this? They're in a building, and they're also parts of the body. In the pyramid, the king's chamber corresponds to the pineal gland, and the queen's chamber corresponds to the pituitary gland. That's the male and female. These are the parents of the spiritual son, Jesus, born in your solar plexus of every human being that's ever walked this earth, commencing at puberty, and it occurs and produces this seed every 29 and a half days. Whether you know it or not, whether you like it or not, It just happens. Now, what we don't know is this seed will produce a oil that flows down your spinal cord from the upper brain to your lower brain. You have 2 brain centers. You have to have 4, but 2 main brain centers in your body. This is hell as far as one's anatomy. People need to know that your body is the temple of God. Now, church tells us that, but we don't really act like that, and we surely don't treat our bodies like that. Because if obesity causes that oil and that seed to be destroyed, overdoing anything, any kind of stress, alcohol, anything that is not pure in nature is adverse to the system. Period. So that's the first thing we have to understand is your body's going to produce this oil. Okay? This is that so-called Christ or Jesus everybody's looking for on Sunday. Now, the problem is that once it comes down from heaven and starts down the system, it'll get all the way down here if your chakras are not messed up, meaning if you don't have some blockages somewhere. Okay? Now, all of us in the room got some blockages, so let's be real. Okay? And how do we know that? Because if the oil in now the River Jordan is your spinal cord. Okay? That straight and narrow path, that is your spinal cord. All right? If this was working correctly, they said the oil should be odorless and colorless. I talked to the head of neurology at Truman. He said he had never seen anyone's spinal fluid look like that. Most of our spinal fluids have pus in them and have a level of odor. But the real test is if you have any kind of problem in your body, you know the oil's not working right. Because your body is a self-healing, regenerative machine that will work perfectly if this is not fouled up somewhere. Okay? So, if in the case of, I got glasses on there tell you that my oil is not what it should be, tooth problems, all of that. Right? Okay? The other part of it is the 12 cell salts. Everybody in here knows about the cell salts, right? The cell salts are the actual rocks of the earth that make everything in the universe and also make the human anatomy. What they did is took a human body and cremated it and analyzed the ashes. And when they got through, they found that the ashes actually consisted of
12 mineral salts.
These 12 mineral salts that correspond directly to the Zodiac and are the disciples. Okay?
12 months.
The 12 months is the 12 everything. The children of Israel, everything that has to do with the number 12 actually goes back to these 12 cell salts and the constellations in the heavens and how all these things, so it is above, so it is below. This thing always is going to work in harmony. Whether we see, there's why we must know the truth, even with respect to masonry, etc. The one thing that church ward, the reason I like church ward, and like I say, Martinez, Keon, and some that's been around me for a long time already know this. But I spoke at Northwestern University years ago. And the one thing they said, and it was to the graduate school, they said, if you're coming down here with Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark's scholarship, don't come because we don't accept it. So don't even come down here with that. Okay? But when